Good morning. I want to thank, first off, Archbishop Chaput and Bishop McIntyre and Father Wild and all the priests who were involved in the beautiful liturgy that we just had. And I want to also thank Steve Boza for the leadership that he's been giving to us in advancing the culture of life. He's the one who put this event together today, and I'm looking forward to hearing from all the other panelists myself. Last summer, my wife and I were taking a trip up to New Hampshire to visit our daughter. And it's a long ride, so I loaded up all my CDs to make sure I had something to listen to on the way up. And my taste in music goes way back to the time when we had doo-wop music and the Beatles and some of those different musicians. And my wife and I were listening on the way up and hearing all the sounds that we used to listen to when we were young and just falling in love. And we sang some of them together, and we listened to the words of other ones, and I started to notice a pattern. Almost every song had some young boy expressing his eternal love for his true love. Or some of them were a girl the other way around saying how much she loved her guy. The only exception to that was when someone was talking about how sad they were that they lost their true love. Almost every song was about this love between a man and a woman. And it occurred to me that probably 90% of all the songs ever written have a lot to do with this, this mystery of the love between a man and a woman. And it's not really too much of a mystery as to why. This love between a man and a woman is the foundation for marriage and the family. It is a treasured and meaningful experience in life, and it's the source of one of our greatest comforts. The physical expression of this love is the door by which God himself regularly enters our world to do the miraculous deed that only he can do, and that's create new life. Sex, therefore, is holy because it reflects God himself and brings forth new life. But it is not to be abused. Its purpose and its place lifted to a place of great importance to humanity. And how we treat sex dramatically determines the success or failure of our society. The Catholic Church teaches that the sacrament of matrimony connects a man and a woman and God into a lifelong committed relationship, which is open to and welcomes children as the blessings that they are. Marriage is the mutual is for the mutual happiness of a man and wife, and for the formation of families where children are brought to know, love, and serve God. I'm going to presume that I don't have to discuss the moral teachings of our church on abortion or contraception, and I will focus on the practical elements that are attached to this issue. The first slide is a quote by Jacques Maritain, a tremendous philosopher from the 20th century. And in a book called Man and the State, he made the observation that promiscuity possesses the capability to regenerate the population of the human race. But if that was what was relied on, there would be total chaos. Peter Kreeft is a philosopher at Boston College, and he wrote a good book called How to Win the Culture War. And he identifies strategies that are being used against us to change the culture and take God out of the culture. And here are some of the ways that he discusses that are being used against us. The most powerful means to destroy a society is to destroy the one absolutely fundamental building block, the family. The family is best destroyed by destroying its foundation, stable marriage. Marriage is destroyed by loosening its glue, sexual fidelity. Fidelity is destroyed by the sexual revolution. The sexual revolution is propagated mainly by the media, which is now massively biased against morality and in favor of sexual liberation. The incredibly successful tactic has been to win hearts through hormones. In sexual issues, objective morality must always be denied. So what do we mean when we talk about the sexual revolution? In fact, we're talking about exactly what Jacques Maritain warned us about. The pill became commercially available in '62 and triggered a number of legal battles that ended up in Supreme Court decisions. 1965, Griswold versus Connecticut, where a state said contraception could not be denied to married couples. And this was the case in which they found, or they discovered in a penumbra of emanations, this right to privacy that eventually was relied upon to decide Roe versus Wade. In 1970, there was another case, Eisenstadt versus Baird, which said that states couldn't prohibit unmarried couples from having contraception. Of course, 73 was Roe versus Wade, the abortion decision that has resulted in 58 million surgical abortions and probably over 100 million chemical abortions so far. And in 1990, we probably have the most bizarre decision of all, and I'm going to quote from it because it's so, you think of the Supreme Court, you think these are scholars of the law. They look at all the legal implications and weigh things, and they come up with a legal decision. But this is part of their decision. At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence and meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of the human life. Beliefs about these matters could not define the attributes of personhood were they formed under the compulsion of the state. Does that sound like legal reasoning to you, or is it just kind of something that somebody made up? To me, it doesn't sound legal. The pill also triggered a wonderful document in 1968 by Pope Paul VI, Humanae Vitae. In this document, the Pope proclaimed the dual nature of sex as unitive and procreative. He warned against the objectification of women and degrading the dignity of sex into a recreational activity. He also warned of materialism and antipathy towards new life. And he cautioned that oppressive governments could use this to limit population, and he also warned of unforeseen consequences. You think of the oppressive governments, China's one-child policy, you think of unintended consequences, same-sex marriage. These are all part of what happened because of this contraceptive battle that we've been in for close to 50 years now. Beyond the moral and legal considerations, there are also significant medical risks, which some other members of the panel are going to be touching on. I'll just touch on a couple very briefly. According to the Journal of American Medicine, using birth control doubles the risk of a stroke. The Mayo Clinic says that if a woman uses contraception for at least 4 years before her first full-term pregnancy, she has a 52% greater risk of breast cancer. There are other health risks as well, which I'm going to leave for the other panelists to discuss. I'm going to now show a chart that shows out-of-wedlock birth rate from 1928 until almost the present. Note that for about 50 years, the out-of-wedlock birth rate was at 5% or less. If you look at the period where in 1962 where the pill became available, suddenly there was a spike in out-of-wedlock births. By 1972, a program called Title X was started by the federal government, which subsidized contraception for anyone who wanted it. Been a pretty successful program, huh? Clearly, the justification for this program that everyone says over and over again every year is we want to try to help the poor to control their fertility so that they're not overwhelmed with children and that they can't afford. And that's the result. We've gone from under 5% with no contraceptives and no aid from the government on contraceptives to now 42%. That means almost half the children born in America today are born in a family without fathers. Peg Luxick wrote on Father's Day, she had an article that came out in her publication called Battleground, and she asked these questions. Ask any warden at a juvenile detention center about the single factor that most of the inmates have in common, and you will be told that they came from a family without a father. Talk to those who work with teenage girls who become pregnant and ask the same question, you'll get the same answer. If you speak to a school guidance counselor about the characteristics of those children who drop out, you'll hear about children without fathers. Finally, examine the statistics about children who grow up in conditions of poverty, and you will find a direct correlation between economic level and family structure, with fatherless families at the bottom of the pile. In fact, for every problem situation involving children, a missing father is the single most common factor. This next frame shows it tracks government spending on poverty programs since 1964, almost at the same time frame that we were just looking at for the growth in out-of-wedlock birth. In 1964, during the Johnson administration, when they first started the war on poverty, the spending was $40 billion. These are inflation-corrected dollars. $40 billion. If we were spending at the same rate today, we'd be spending $40 billion. Instead, we've increased that by a factor of 25. Today, we're spending over $1 billion a year on these, $1 trillion a year on these poverty programs. Most of us in this room would already have an objection to this program on moral grounds. But everyone here could probably figure out a way to address their legislator and say, tell me again why this gets funded every year. Is this showing success? Is this what the program is supposed to be doing, or is it doing the opposite? And if it's doing the opposite, let's put some accountability into the program. Let's not just fund it for no reason or to make things worse. Charles Murray wrote a book called Losing Ground. And in it, he made an observation that if an impartial observer from another country were to be shown the data of the black lower class from 1950 to 1980, but given no information about contemporaneous changes in society or public policy, that observer would infer that racial discrimination against the black poor increased drastically during the 1960s and 70s. No explanation except a surge in outright virulent discrimination would be as easily to explain to a blind observer why things went so wrong. So with this much background, let's turn to the HHS mandate. The mandate requires that any employer with 50 or more employees provide health insurance to each of its employees, which will pay for contraception, chemical abortion, and sterilization. Now ask yourself, given the federal government is already subsidizing Planned Parenthood at $500 million a year, given that we have Title X growing each year, given that state governments are handing out tens of millions of dollars in family planning funds each year, and given that nearly every school district in the country is handing out condoms to every student from 4th grade up, do we really need another contraceptive program from the federal government? The answer is clearly no. And as we discussed earlier, this program has already been demonstrated to be an unmitigated disaster. So what would justify this mandate, especially against people with conscientious objection to it, or against religious institutions themselves? The answer goes back to one that was waged millennia ago in the Old Testament in the form of Jerusalem versus Babylon. Today we can substitute the spirit of secularism for Babylon, the city of the flesh, and the Christian spirit for Jerusalem, the city of God. But the underlying spiritual warfare is the same, and it is warfare. We are at war, and we must recognize this fact. The secular spirit hates Christianity and cannot abide it, so it has sought to destroy it. The church, has bloodied and bruised as she may be, is the strongest and most dangerous opponent that stands in the way of the utopian quest. For secularists, the sexual revolution is their jihad. It's a holy war for them. They will not rest until they neutralize every vestige of Christianity. What happens to a religious institution that refuses to comply? Well, it will be fined $100 per day for each employee. Let's look at the impact of these ruinous fines on a typical Catholic high school, with a staff, administration, and faculty totaling 150 people. If the Catholic Church doesn't buckle under to this HHS mandate, they would be responsible for fines totaling $15,000 per day. That's $100 a day for each employee. A year's worth of fines would total for one high school $5.5 million. There are about 20 high schools in the Philadelphia Archdiocese. The fines would total a figure higher by quite a bit than the running of the schools. let's take the Little Sisters of the Poor. They're also compelled to provide contraception, abortion coverage, and sterilization for their sisters. It's not only irrational, but it violates their religious beliefs. And again, if they don't buckle under, they're fined $100 each for each day. How about a Catholic businessman or a Christian businessman from another denomination, or no denomination at all, who just opposes contraception and abortion? He's also subject to that. And if he has 50 employees at $100 a day, he's paying $1.8 million a year from his business. Going to put him out of business. The First Amendment to the Constitution says, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or the free exercise thereof. It would seem clear that this is a violation of this enumerated right. As the battle has waged, the secularists have resorted to a familiar tactic, distorting the language, in order to advance their agenda. Rather than religious liberty, they refer to freedom of worship. Their objective is to box worship, that is prayer, inside the building. When you come outside the building, you no longer can have your religious expression. A number of lawsuits have been filed about this, and the church is being precluded from filing their suit because they're not yet subject to the fine. The reason that's happened is because these fines were supposed to have started last August 1st of last year, 2012. But the Obama administration gave the church a 1-year postponement. When this meeting was being organized, we thought we would be 10 days away or so from this mandate going into effect. And what happened is, over the past couple of weeks, the Obama administration pushed it back again till January. Make no mistake, they have not said we're not going to do this. They're just trying to get past a lot of political minefields right now, but their intention is to do it, and we're being kind of lulled to sleep. So we have a duty now to stand up and do something about this. The church leaders are showing great resolve, but it's a perilous path. Even the threat of litigation causes enormous legal fees and a huge expense at a time when the church is already under grave financial pressure. This is a time for all of us to acknowledge that we have been too silent in the face of the onslaught against Christianity. In the past month, the Supreme Court undermined marriage by equating it with homosexual behavior. Where was our response? As we face these fines, these ruinous fines, and up until a couple of weeks ago, it was imminent. Now it's a little further out, but where is our response? I'll tell you some of the things that have been done, and some people may get embarrassed about this, but there's two ladies in the audience here, Dot Stippa and Rosemary Friedrich, who got postcards, and they sat outside their church for a couple of Sundays, and they collect postcards for their congressmen and their senators, and they collected over 1,000 in 2 weeks. That's great. Congressmen and senators have to hear from us. The Philadelphia Archdiocese, if we really got serious, we would be sending hundreds of thousands of these postcards to our senators and congressmen so that they would understand that there's a tremendous amount of opposition to these fines going in against our church. We have a couple of other constructive things that we can do, which I'll touch on. One is that the Supreme Court recently, when they made their marriage decision, they threw the issue back to the states. In Pennsylvania, a couple of years ago, we were close to having a constitutional amendment defining marriages between one man and one woman. We need to start that up again. That should be the highest legislative priority that we have at the state level. Secondly, there is another objective that is also an imminent danger, and that is that an abortionist is running for governor of Pennsylvania and is one of the leading candidates, Allison Schwartz. If we allow an abortionist to become governor of Pennsylvania, we are really sunk. This needs to be an enormous effort. We need to unite so that this never happens. The culture of life cannot exist piecemeal. A culture that defends the unborn and protects the sick and helpless also defends marriage. An assault on one is an assault on them all. Let us know our enemy. We cannot be against abortion, but still be for euthanasia or homosexual marriage. Advancing one advances them all. Recently, Professor Robert George at Princeton put out a statement for Christians to reflect on, and I thought it was an important one. For those of us who are Christian, and I suspect the same is true of our friends and other religious traditions, it is tempting to embrace those doctrines and teachings of our faith that are acceptable to the beautiful people, to the trendsetters and opinion shapers, to the powerful and influential, while going silent on or even rejecting those teachings that mark us as standing in opposition to the values that are dominant in the elite sectors of the culture. We are all too willing to be tame Christians. We want the comforts and consolation of religion, but we'd like to have them without the risks or costs. We don't want to jeopardize our friendships, family relationships, professional and economic opportunities, prestige, social status, and the like. We don't want people to think of us as retrograde, out of touch with the times, and much less intolerant or prejudiced. So we're tempted to pick and choose, to be cafeteria Christians. But if we are serious about our faith, we will understand that a true Christian is never a tame Christian. A true Christian will stand up and speak out for what is good and true, what is right and just, both in season and out of season. He or she will not go silent, even when bearing witness is unpopular, even when it is personally or professionally risky. He or she will know that there truly is a cost of discipleship, and be prepared with God's help and by His grace to pay that cost. Whatever it turns out to be, a true Christian will ever be mindful of the words of Jesus Christ Himself. If anyone would be my disciple, then let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. So let me just add in closing, we must all recognize that we are the mystical body of Christ, and that the blood that saved the world 2,000 years ago still flows and is every bit as capable of accomplishing the same work today. But neither sacrifice without love nor love without sacrifice can save our society. Our opponents understand that nothing in the world is as fearsome as a bloody, battered opponent who will never surrender. Let us pledge to be that opponent, even if we get bloodied up and battered and beat up. For as Edmund Burke once warned, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Thank you very much.
I'd like to take 3 questions right now.
We were asked if we could explain where these came from. We actually have a few more, 30 or 40 more is my guess. And yes, and there's a couple of websites that Steve might be able to direct you to as well.
The National Committee for Human Life Amendment works in conjunction with the USCCB, and some time ago, my office sent out to every pastor the information as to where to get these postcards. I'll be glad to resend that to the pastors and also to all of you, so that you could, pick up and feel free to, check with the pastor and say, I received these, could we go ahead and distribute them? So.
And I think also that, Doctor, the flyers that we handed out, do they have the information there? Yes. There's a little flyer that you have that also may have the information where you can get the cards. Yes. The question was, is it true that contraceptives are being given out to 4th graders? The answer is yes. In almost every school district in the country. Yes.
One more question.
The employer mandate is being pushed back until January the 1st, the HHS mandate. There is a mandate to have the insurance by the Obamacare program, and that is not being, that's been pushed back, I think, till 2015 for employers, but the individual mandate has not been affected yet. Now, there is a bill in Congress to postpone it, but I don't know that that's been passed yet. I don't think it has.